episode 80, what? 80, 83. Ooh, okay, I had to look there again. Welcome, everybody, to Chaps Many Cultures. Stay tuned for this episode because we will be talking about things we learned that leaders will need, already need, not will need now, as a result of the pandemic and what we learned through that. Coming up now. Hello. Welcome, everybody. Happy Wednesday, happy hump day, happy middle of the week. Episode 83, Two Chaps, Many Cultures. Brett, what have you learned in the pandemic?
Well, what I learn the most from the people that I work with. And that comes with listening to what they say and what they've learned. And both domestically and across borders, the biggest things, a couple of biggest things have stood out. And I mean, I guess one thing that I've always been an advocate for is personal leadership, more humanistic, more connected leadership with the people that we lead and that we have as leaders. And also because of this this new environment we're in, is how to translate that into the digital world and become more digitally adept at doing that humanistic side of things.
Yeah, that's why we said two big leadership lessons we learned, right? Two big lessons we learned. One, be more digital, and we're modeling it right here, right now for everyone. We've been embracing digital, right? Like never before. And with that comes a need or a requirement, I think, to be more human, to develop more human skills, people skills. I like to refer to them as power skills, because what some may have called in the past soft skills, they're in fact quite powerful skills. And without them, human skills, all the digital might be difficult, right? So let's talk about some of these power skills. What are some of the power skills you've identified for yourself? What is it that makes leadership in a pandemic / post-pandemic world efficient, effective?
Well, I think for leaders, what they've had to do is be able to understand that everybody comes to this digital space at their own pace. Not everybody's comfortable with it, whether that's a cultural thing or whether it's a personality thing. It's something that leaders have to understand and allow people the space and the grace to be able to come to it in their own way. And that means getting comfortable with the environment, getting comfortable with the styles of communication that show up when we communicate across the camera, right? But also modeling perhaps the examples of, or finding out the best practices and putting the best practices in front of the people so that they can learn, and also give them the opportunity to give you feedback as a leader to what is comfortable for them, and to communicate that openly and freely between and inside a team, because everybody needs to be included. This is just like the regular life. I mean, inclusion is important. Inclusion and openness is important. So if you don't have that, you don't have communication, and then how can you build trust?
If you don't have inclusion, you don't have communication, and without communication, how do you build trust? Man, we should engrave that as a over the wide entryway into the Two Chaps Towers, right? I love that. That was quite a nugget. Good on you, Mike. To me, some of those power skills include, or in order to facilitate this step of inclusion, or this level of inclusion, I think we need to be competent humans. And what to me that means we need to be or we want to be, we should want to choose to be efficient communicators. Communicators who listen with the intent of relating and not with the intent of responding with their own agenda. So listening, good emotional competence, emotional intelligence, empathy, understanding obviously other cultural behavioral preferences, being smart about how to use this technology, how to embrace digital in a way that it does not exclude those who are, for whatever reason, still struggling coming on board with it to the degree that you and I may have become comfortable with. And those of you who follow the work that I do, you may have seen me use a term or an acronym I call ICE-Q. ICEQ, not Ice Cube. IQ as in subject matter expertise or competence with the digital world, CQ, cultural intelligence, and EQ, emotional intelligence. And the three together are a basket of human power skills that will determine how efficient you are as a leader going forward, because the old ways are unlikely to cut it in the way we do business now. And it's changed the paradigm. I mean, how many of the plans you made at the end of 2019 going into 2020, how many of these plans did you actually put into place? How many were you able to follow through on, given all the wrenches that were thrown into our gears? I don't know. How about you, Brett? How many of your plans have panned out the way you intended them to?
Well, not many of them. I tend to, I guess, have I had a shorter span even before this. And it wasn't that I didn't have long-term plans. Certainly, you know, personal other things, I had long-term plans of what I wanted to do. But I think the environment in which we work in is so dynamic and so fast moving now in a global sense, then it's hard to make long-term plans. So I mean, we saw certain patterns, so we were starting to plan for it already, going more digital even before this happened, right? But going more virtual, giving the flexibility and the open options for people to engage in the training and coaching and leading and facilitating that we did. So I would say that, strangely enough, in many cases, this just kind of brought it forward. There's many people say this has kind of brought forward or compacted 10 years of digital adoption into pretty much 7 or 8 months. Right? Everybody's had to do it, and tools have had to adapt and evolve. Even things like Zoom, you know, they were caught short with security, and I don't blame Zoom for that. Right? That's something that was probably going to come anyway, but it was just such a big impact where you had so many people doing this. And of course, in those situations where you've got people that are vulnerable and where they're really just focused on the actual platform itself, you're going to have spurious characters that are going to take advantage of that. And, you know, to their credit, you know, these organizations responded really, really fast. I mean, I don't think people appreciate how quickly some of the leaders in this digital space really responded. So we need to take their lead as leaders and say, you know, we have to be dynamic, we have to be evolving, we have to see what's coming on the horizon, understanding that horizon is a lot closer than it used to be.
And I want to echo what you said, Brett, and I want to express my gratitude, because how many times have we gone through painful adoptions of new technologies where we sometimes were resistant to it? I remember seeing an article this week about the city of Hamburg in Germany, who have spent hundreds of thousands of euros to delay the implementation of a new version of their software in the administration. I think the police force in Hamburg are still using Windows 7, and they paid Microsoft money to delay the upgrades for whatever reason. I'm sure they had their reasons, but this just is one example how how the adoption of new tech or new features or new functions can be a bit fraught with obstacles, right? It in the past, and I've lived long enough to experience it as sometimes tedious and frustrating processes. And fast forward to 2020, the speed at which many of us leapt, I don't know how to say, moved forward quickly into this realm, and the service providers who were able to adjust to that I think that deserves a big round of applause. Yes, we're paying for it, right? Many of us are using the paid versions of the platform we're using here or for Zoom. However, the barrier of entry, the cost, the investment to play in that field has diminished significantly compared to just 2-3 years ago, right? So it has become a lot easier to play in this field. And as one of my mentors would say, yes, now we all have a voice, and we all have, the threshold has been lowered to levels never seen before. So the barriers of entry have been much more reduced than compared to the past. However, that doesn't mean your voice gets heard. Just because you have the ability to play does not necessarily mean you will have traction. So this is where the human side comes in. Without your human factor, without being developed or continuing to work on yourself in terms of your power skills on the human side, your digital skills may be great, but it won't necessarily lead you to the trough of success, so to say. So right. One without the other will be a bit lopsided.
Yeah, absolutely. And that means that you have to transform, not just kind of bring what you did in the old space to this, and hopefully it works. Right. You've actually got to learn it. You've got to take the time to be curious about what works and what doesn't in this space. And that is just normal leadership in any day of the week. But it's been forced on us now that in this digital space, what works in the real world, I mean the in-person world, not the real world. This is still the real world, but in the in-person world doesn't necessarily transform into the digital space. So you have to be agile, and you have to learn what, and I use that term intentionally, transformation, not just moving it, right? And it's not picking up and moving and pitching a tent in a new campsite. There's a road to this campsite, and you need some GPS to get you there.
What do they call that in music? I think I read a term the other day, and I'm not a musical mind, so to say, but when big bands or school bands, orchestras play popular music, they transpose, I believe is the word, right? They take the melody and all the hooks, but they transpose it into a different arrangement with different instruments, maybe replace the vocal with an instrument, whatever that may be. So transposing our skill set into digital, right?
Transposing is the terminology, using proper terminology, but the transposing is a movement between keys. It's an up and down movement between a set of the set keys. I think the interpretation, I think what you're talking about there is a great analogy, because what you're saying is the arrangement. You're changing the arrangement of the orchestra to say a voice that's played by a cello could be played by a violin or a trumpet, depending on the kind of dynamic you're trying to get to, right? So
that's what I mean. Thank you.
That's a really great way to look at it. Of course, I love the music world, so I can relate to that especially, and so of course that takes a good conductor. Okay, so the conductor needs to understand the different voices of these of that little baton, and of course I have, again, one of my mentors is Ben Zander, and I rabbit on about him a lot, and he says that he came to the realization in life where he realized that his power totally depends on the players that he leads, right? And the way that he can inspire them to really realize what is possible for them. And that's no different in the digital space, inspiring people to do what, maybe what we're doing here. We tell everybody, everybody say, oh, you're on this show every day, you do it. How amazing. Well, looks magical. It's not that magical, and we're not perfect at it. And we might annoy people. So
Do we care though?
We don't care. We're here to annoy. If we don't ruffle some feathers, then we're not doing our job right.
Yeah, exactly. So we would like to hear from you. Put it in the comments, whatever platform you're on, LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, put it in there and tell us what type of human skill or digital skill you developed or honed or fine-tuned and began to master during these times. Tasha Arnold says,
hey, Tasha.
Hello. Some cultures are suffering more than others during this time. High versus low context cultures or countries that don't have the infrastructure / bandwidth, making the need for us to understand these things even more important. Interesting point. Thank you, Tasha. Brett, how do high context versus low context cultures suffer differently from the pandemic?
Oh, well, you again, being a leader and understanding the context, or at least being curious about the context. Some people will tell you exactly, like Tasha says, they'll tell you exactly what their challenges are. They will be explicit about what is the barrier to their entry point, or the barrier to them being able to communicate effectively across a digital space. Other cultures are not, maybe a little bit resistant in that. And I'm just kind of paraphrasing maybe what Tasha means. I'm hoping I'm getting the right point. But some cultures, they are suffering in a different way, and they may not be led to the type of communication style that means that they're going to be explicit about the challenges that they're experiencing. And therefore, as a leader, if you see them struggling, you might just assume that they're not communicating, they're not learning, they're not being an active part of a team or the organization, and that may be the furthest from the truth.
Right.
They just don't have that. They're assuming that or they're hoping that you may understand the context in which they're struggling.
Well, and a lot of the high context communication relies on nonverbals and on cues that have nothing to do with the word base of how we create meaning. And Tasha is specifying her comment here by saying, yes, eye contact, building relationships. So how we create message is not, and we talked about this on this program before, it's not just the word base that we use, it's the tonality of our voice, it's the facial features or the whole body language that comes with it. And that becomes more, well, I wouldn't say difficult. We're learning new ways to express ourselves via digital means. And some members of your team may suffer in silence because they are not, it's not opportune to them to voice their discomfort openly, because high context or maybe even high hierarchy culture may not allow them, or they think they're not allowed to voice their concerns the way that we would do in a low context, more egalitarian framework.
Right. And they might be looking for a more direct, in-person, one-on-one type of interaction where the leader reaches out and uses that kind of that paternal type of leadership that says, tell me privately. You may not want to share it with the group, but tell me privately, what can I do to help you? What can we do to support you in a better way? And that may be an indication, or it may be a good lead into opening up that conversation when it's kind of a safer space that they're able to share that with. So
yeah, but how many times have you met people in leadership positions who don't necessarily practice or fine-tuning their antennas to these human needs, right? This is what we meant from the beginning when we said, yes, digital is that's the zeros and ones, that's the black and white learning. However, the human power skills, there is so much nuance. And as a leader, if you want to be effective and you don't have all the in-person, live in the same room interaction abilities that you used to have before, now you're using more and more digital tools to do so. How well is your ear trained? How well are your observing eyes trained to pick up on the nonverbals? How much emotional and cultural intelligence do you have to respond to a diverse team the way you need to in order to be effective, right?
Yeah. Well, we heard Simon Sinek not just recently talk about this, that the Jack Welch type of culture of corporate, the benefit of the stockholder to the to the detriment of everything else. Works for a short period of time. It's certainly working in his organization, right? GE became a giant, but I remember reading that book and being fundamentally just, confronted by the fact that there was this, we developed the top 10% and then we just get rid of the the bottom 10%. And there's no questions asked. There was almost like just a cutoff point. If you drop below that line, it's like the Premier League in the UK, right? If you drop below that line, there was no excuse. And
or the Bundesliga in Germany. Just saying.
Yeah, and what team is in the top league? I don't know. I'm just gonna but it is, it seemed really brutal to me, and I hated the book. I thought, well, here's a leader who had done some great things, and as all kind of leadership books, and we try and read these for self-development, but really I didn't like it. It was kind of like a horror story, and there's got to be a better way. And I think Simon Sinek said it recently, and he said that we're kind of going back to that, but we're having to unwind 10, 20 years, 30 years of greed is good mentality. We're in a global world where you've got to understand and be empathetic and be a human leader. It's going to take a little bit to unwind that. We've gone a long way down the track, but we've got certain impediments, political, socially, and that kind of thing that are in our way. But it doesn't mean we should give up. We should certainly be part of it.
The greed is good mentality. We're going off on a tangent here where you should, I think you will have to rein me in, because we'll talk about this for the rest of the day. But that also is based on cultural preferences, right? So the greed is good. The winning most worldview that is found in certain cultural environments where winning, scoring, succeeding is part of the rewarded behavior, and some cultures display that more, and other cultures are more communitarian, where relationships and the sustainability of those are at the forefront of doing business. So I think that the greed that some have displayed over the last, as you said, 20, 30 years, we'll see how the relationships that you built or didn't build with your greed is good mentality, how they will be serving you in the next decade.
Absolutely.
Will remain to be seen.
This is a great point, by the way. As a leader, if you don't think that you have to have all the answers, right? And I think this brings up a point, is that, I've learned a lot of stuff from YouTube too. And Tasha just brought this point to fruition. By the way, we're live on YouTube too, just quick.
Yes, just in case you're wondering.
So we're on YouTube, but there's so many things on YouTube that, I joke, there's always some 15-year-old in a basement somewhere who has worked out what you want to do. And you may have to kind of weed through a few videos here and there to find one that matches your style and your learning intent. But they're there. There's lots of people, lots of wonderful, generous people in the YouTube world.
Now I'm going to play the old people card here. I'm going to be totally ageist, and I'm going to flaunt our age, Brett, because yes, there is going to be a 12, 15-year-old on YouTube teaching us about all the technical digital skills. Now, how many 15-year-old communication coaches do you know? How many 16-year-old interculturalists have you come across, right? So some things, especially those people skills, those power skills, sometimes age and experience might be an advantage. Just saying.
No, I know.
Prove me wrong, Internet. Prove me wrong.
I'm thinking I'm talking more about the actual, I think maybe, and from what, hopefully that's what Tasha's referring to, is that the tools that we use, like we're using now, StreamYard, Zoom, these kind of things where there's some technical stuff that once you use it over and over again, there's some really good tips and that kind of thing.
Of course. Yeah. And I think that's the beauty in comparing digital and human, right? So for digital, probably the younger, the more adventurous, the more open to new geeky stuff, the better. However, some skills when it comes to human interaction, being good people, so to say, being mindful and inclusive and efficient people, that's a skill, at least in my experience, that's something that I got better at with age. My 30-year-old self would have sucked at this.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you. Of course, you know, I grew up in music with MIDI files. You know, remember?
All right then. Okay, so this took a wrong turn. Okay.
You remember MIDI files?
Oh, what is this? Tell me, Uncle Brett.
Files. Yes, used to play along with backing tracks, and with we had a great keyboard player that wrote MIDI files track by track by track by track, and and that stuff used to go. I don't want to do that. That's for you. And now I find myself trying to almost recreating that kind of stuff, going down rabbit holes in technical stuff. Like, I really want to learn how that works. And I think, you're right, my 30 to 35-year-old rock singer, where I just wanted to sing and get off stage and drink a beer. Now I'm like, let me sit here and work this out. So anyway, it's rock good fun.
Singer. Did you have a long mullet back then? Did you shake your hair and stuff like that?
Actually, no. By the time, no, I think I didn't. I had a mullet at one stage, but that was long gone by the time I became a regular fixture in bars around Sydney. So,
right.
And certainly I have no hair to shake anymore. I'm
no
kind of more like the midnight oil Peter Garrett look now, so that kind of thing. So yeah.
All right, these were just two of the things we learned. We will have more learnings. This was something that came up spur of the moment today. We'll present some more learnings for you, maybe from us, and even better from other people. Right. Absolutely. So stay tuned. Two Chaps Mini Cultures, episode 83. This was it for today. Mic drop on my end. Brett, take us home.
See you later, guys. Bye.